the deal with seals? I mean, all that cute and cuddly had to come from somewhere, right? But how did they evolve? Seals belong to a group called pinnipeds, which includes true seals, eared seals, and walruses. Pinnipeds are also marine mammals, along with cetaceans, whales, and sirenians, sea cows. Keep in mind that marine mammals is not an official taxonomic grouping, which means that these three groups of animals came from very different ancestors. Scientists have a pretty good idea of how whales and sea cows went from being terrestrial creatures to the aquatic marine forms that we see today. But how pinnipeds made that transition from the land to the sea is a little less clear. For a while, paleontologists weren't even sure how pinnipeds were all related to one another. At first, when they just looked at their physical traits, paleontologists thought that true seals were more closely related to mustaloids, and that eared seals and walruses were more closely related to bears. But looking at new data and including molecular data like DNA, it's become clear that pinnipeds came from a single common ancestor, and that their closest living relatives are the mustaloids. So their terrestrial relative looked like a small mustaloid-like carnivore, and we know what they look like today, but what happened in between? In 2009, a new fossil was described named Puella darwini, and it was suggested that Puella was a transitional form between the terrestrial relatives of pinnipeds and their current aquatic form. Puella was small and otter-like with webbed hands and feet. The link between Puella and pinnipeds led paleontologists to take a second look at some other fossils that had been difficult to classify, and they realized that some of those creatures were also related to the pinniped group, including this little guy, Potamotherium. So pinnipeds started out as terrestrial carnivores that were maybe a bit mustaloid-like, and then they transitioned into a semi-aquatic form that was more otter-like, that lived in fresh water like lakes and rivers. From there, they moved into a marine habitat. Their tails shortened, and their hands and feet got larger and more flipper-like, and they started to look like this guy, Anelyarctos. From there, the three groups of modern pinnipeds split from one another and went on to evolve into their modern forms. We still have a lot to learn about pinniped evolution, but we have a better idea of how they came to be the critters that we know them as today, most of which are absolutely adorable, except for leopard seals. It's the stuff of nightmares.